and hope that you're having a good day. If you're in the state of North Carolina, hope you're not rained out too badly this afternoon. We are glad to have you join today's Budget and Compensation Subcommittee meeting. You should have received via email a number of documents from Dr. Evans. So I ask you to access those documents if you have not already done so. And we will begin by approving today's agenda. You should have received that agenda again via email from Dr. Evans. So you will find that agenda attached to the newsletter that you've received. So at this moment in time, we will accept a motion to approve today's agenda.
I'll motion to approve the agenda. Monica Lambert.
Thank you, Dr. Lambert. May I have a second?
Second.
Jackie, oh, go ahead.
Erica Williams, second.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. It's been moved and properly seconded that we accept the agenda as presented before you. All those in favor, if you would please say aye.
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 Thank you. All those opposed, you have the same right. Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you for approving the agenda. Secondly, we need to approve the minutes from our last meeting on June 17th, 2021. Dr. Evans sent those to you as well. If I can have a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved, Jackie Ennis.
Thank you. I have a second.
Dan Swartz, second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded that we approve the minutes from the June 17, 2021 meeting. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, you have the same right. Motion carries. The minutes have been approved. And I'd also like to take just a moment to thank Dr. Evans for taking such copious notes of our conversations. She does a great job. So I want to make certain that I said to her that Dr. Fleming and I say to her, thank you so very much for making sure that we have such detailed minutes for our meetings. Dr. Fleming, I'll kick it over to you, sir, if you'd like to go through the norms.
Absolutely. Just a few of our kind of house norms here. The work of the subcommittee is led by the interests and needs of North Carolina students and educators. We want to keep that in mind. The subcommittees will collaborate and work to achieve consensus on their final proposals, recognizing that unanimous agreement on all details will not be achievable. All opinions are valued. Members will not diminish the opinion of others. Members will share talk time and not dominate conversations. Members will speak with specificity so others fully understand your thoughts. Members commit to full engagement at meetings and on important work in between meetings. And I don't know if there are any questions on that, but happy to answer them if there are.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming. We also want to remind you all, before we remind you of the guiding principles, just want to remind you what our work is as a subcommittee on the second page of the newsletter that you received. The charge for the subcommittee is always present. I just want to read that to you very quickly. By January 1 of 2022, this committee will prepare and submit a plan to the Professional Educator Preparation and Standards Commission, PEPSC, that accomplishes the following. Number one, we are to articulate the salaries for the license tiers in the certification framework. Number two, we are to provide specifics for the required hold harmless provision. Number three, we are to integrate out-of-state certified candidates into that framework. And number four, we are to propose a detailed budget plan for the Office of State Budget and Management that supports the compensation framework. So I just want to remind you of the work that we are tasked to achieve as a subcommittee. To that point, then, our guiding principles for this work is to ensure that what we do has an impact on our students and that it's measurable in an authentic setting, i.e. in the presence of students and their learning. So just wanted to remind you of our work task and the principles that guide the work we will do. So our focus for today's meeting really is on the salary for the licensed tiers. So we will continue our conversation from our June meeting, where we're focusing very explicitly and myopically on the salary for apprentice through license 4 and the salary for positions using license 4 advanced. So we are still in that space for our conversation today. Dr. Fleming, anything you might like to add, sir?
No, I think you've hit it there, but hit it well. But I am excited to work on the new tool that we've got. I'm really looking forward to that.
To that point, Dr. Fleming, that's a great segue. We will now introduce and engage you in conversation. We have Dr. Andrew Salberg and Dr. Andy Baxter. If you will recall, in our last conversation back in June, we had some conversation about modeling and whether or not we could create some tool that would allow us to use real-time data to start getting a feel and sense for what we might be thinking about relative to compensation recommendations. So our team at DPI, they've done some great work over the last month, and Dr. Salberg and Dr. Baxter are here to share with you this compensation scenario tool that we will be using today, this afternoon, in breakout sessions. But before we break you into groups, we wanted to make certain that we introduce you to this tool and spend some time helping you understand what the tool does and what it does not do. And then we'll give you your directions before we move you into breakout groups. So Dr. Salberg, Dr. Baxter, thank you also very much for being with us. We'll turn the floor over to you.
Thanks, Dr. Graham. This is Andrew. I'm going to tee this up by starting with handing it off to Andy Baxter. Our colleague Andy Baxter has been working behind the scenes to create this tool. And essentially what he's going to do is sort of hold everybody's hand through this. It's a sort of a 2-page tool. He's going to walk you through how to use that and sort of frame your thinking before he hands it back to me, and then I'll walk you through the next steps as to what we're going to do with the breakouts. So Andy, can you tee us up here?
Sure thing. Thank you very much, and good to be here with all of you. I put in the chat a link where these tools are located. I think it's going to be best for those of you that are able to click on that link and to be able to access it and use it as I explain it. So we've created 2 tools for you to use beginning today, and they're both designed to give you a feel for how the types of conversations you've been having so far about different assumptions about the number of teachers in each proposed license area and their salaries would add up to a total system cost. In our own discussions as a team, we figured some people approach these in different ways. Some people want to start from where we are now and think about where we ought to be. And some people like to start with where we ought to be and then work backwards to where we are now. And it all just depends on the way that you like to think about this. I think that together, the 2 tools will be helpful, at least in some respects, for people from both persuasions. The big caveat to remember is that these are just tools. They are crude models, not designed to be incredible forecast tools to the exact dollar of what we're anticipating. More useful as thought exercises.
Andy,
So
let me interrupt for just a second there, because I know Tom wanted me to intercede on that point right there. Folks, I just want you to be very sensitive to the fact that the way we've created these documents and resources here has very specific underpinnings as to how we created them. And so you know, if we were to take this information and distribute it to other folks who are not so savvy as to what they're looking at, it could be misinterpreted. So just be sensitive about the data that you're looking at here, because of the way we have it put together, and because of the kind of work that we're doing here within this group. Just an FYI. Sorry about that, Andy.
no problem. So this first tool is designed to help you in two ways: to see an estimate of the percentage of current teachers that we think would fall into each proposed license based on the requirements of those licenses, at least as articulated so far, and then to estimate the ballpark cost of bringing those current salaries up to proposed salary floors for each license. The goal is not an exact forecast, but just a tool so that you can see how setting salary floors for each type of license will affect the total compensation. And all of these figures are just estimates. So this first tool has 4 parts. And the first is you click the plus sign. We took all the teachers who are currently employed as of the end of 2021, and using our best estimates, what bucket would they fall into in terms of the proposed licenses? The first thing you'll notice, there's not an apprentice slot there because we don't have a way to extrapolate from our current teaching data who those apprentices would be, but they'll figure in a little bit more in the second tool. You see we've got license 1. Those are initially professional licensed teachers who've not completed either their content or their pedagogy testing requirement. We think right now that would be around 2% of the current teachers. License 2 are those same teachers, but who have completed one or the other of the IPL or CPL. License 3, they've completed both of those. License, I'm going to skip this 4 minus and explain that in a second. License 4 would be teachers with continuing professional licenses who have met the criterion of 3 or more years of meeting or exceeding growth in the past 5 years. And then we've put the 2 advanced roles into one bucket just for this purpose. And that's because in our data, we don't have a way to distinguish those that would be qualified for the advanced leadership from the advanced excellence. So just for this tool, they're lumped together. This 4 minus, this is the part that Tom really wished he was here for and not on the coast of Maine fishing, is a title of, these are the continuing professional licensed teachers who meet the requirements of 4, except in one big way. They have not met the criterion of 3+ years of meeting or exceeding expected growth. And that's a bucket that Andrew can speak to a little bit later, but while it's not technically one of the proposed licenses, that is a group of teachers. Right now, about 8% of our teachers, we estimate, that would fall into that bucket. So that's this kind of base figure. And again, these are just estimates. And one of the big reasons they're just estimates is that we don't have effectiveness data for many of these teachers. And so we basically were extrapolating from the existing EVAS distribution and using that as a proxy about the relative effectiveness of teachers. So that's where that is. The second component of this are the license floors. And here's where you're going to set an experiment with different license floors. And I use the word floor intentionally here. We are not talking about local supplements in this. So this would just be from a state perspective, what the floor would be. You've got the different license types and you just use your slider and you could say, well, let's just see what would happen if license 1 is at 45,000, etc. That'll become a little bit more evident in just a second. So you can adjust your sliders, and then what you can do is sometimes people want to see just the dollars, and then sometimes people want to see just the salaries relative to, in this case, license 4, which was probably going to be, that's the group that has the most people. And so as you do your adjustments, you can say, okay, am I comfortable with that? If I have my salaries this way, it looks like I would the advanced license, they would make about 24% more than the license 4. You follow me? So this is just a little tool to help you get the relative. The real payoff of the chart is this third component, and let me explain what you're seeing. Each row represents teachers that we think would fall into this existing license at this time. So this would be all the license 1, all the license 2, license 3. Each bar represents a group of those current teachers who we think would fit in that license and who are currently paid at this salary. So for example, if we looked at license 3 and moused over that, you would say there's about 2.3% of all teachers, of all these teachers, current teachers, are making around $35,000. We just rounded to the nearest thousand to keep it as clean as we could. And so you see the distributions with the bars for each group. One thing you notice right away, just like up here, the height of these bars that are showing you where the most people are, you're seeing a number of them in license 4. And the color of the bars. When you set your license floor here, let's use license 4 as an example, this purple line is showing you where you have set the proposed floor. Every salary that's below that shows up in a dark blue. So all of these teachers in these blue bars, they're below your proposed floor of 50,000. The ones that are the lighter blue are people whose salary would be above that and would fall if we decide some sort of hold harmless thing that you will work through that's on down your bullet list of things to talk through. These people's salary would be unaffected. So for example, again with license 4, if I raised it to say 60,000, you see that's this many folks that would fall underneath that proposed floor. Just
Andy, let me just
yes.
interrupt for a second. And we got a question that came in that I think is relevant right now, which is for clarification. Does teacher include only classroom teachers or all categories of licensed staff who are considered in the broader context of teacher? So when we cooked this up, was it everybody or just teachers?
It was defined by the job codes that our office usually uses to define a classroom teacher.
There you go. Okay, thank you.
And I can get through those, after the fact.
Thank you.
Just as a reference point, there is these dotted lines show you the median salary for that group, the median current. The way it starts, you don't see those because they are, I've set the proposed at the median, but as you move it, you'll see, and that's just as a reference point. So in other words, regardless of what you've set to proposed, for license 4, about half the teachers have salaries below 50,000, and about half of the teachers in this group are above. If you want to see, well, how many teachers then are we talking about within each group that would be affected if we set the salaries at your proposed things? That's what this first thing, you add the cumulative percentage of teachers. And this is like a rolling sum or a rolling total. If you decided the license 4 floor should be 60,000, 100% of the teachers that we project to be licensed 4 would have to have their salary raised for that. If you set it back a little bit, like at say 48,000, then you'd say 41% of the teachers would need to have their salary raised to get to your floor. It's just a way of kind of knowing how many teachers would be affected that are current teachers based on the floor that you select. You can also see, related to that, well, how much then would the cumulative cost be to raise people up to the floor that you've set? So if we set the license 4 floor at 48,000, that means it would take an additional $155 million to get the folks to that level. And that number is including the benefits. So this would be the salary, but this total is the salary plus the benefits to get them up to that. So that's how this works. You can, if you adjusted it, you'll see how the if we set it to 63,000 the floor, it would be just over $1 billion of additional cost. So the main part of this is just for you to see what is going to drive some of the total cost to this. And you can aggregate that by clicking up to this top button where you see the grand total. There are 3 figures up here, and that's what you want to show, what I want to explain. These first 2 aren't going to move no matter what you push down here. They're representing the current funding, and that's for these positions, local funding, state funding, and federal funding are the sources. Now, local funding for the base pay, not the local supplement. Again, that's not concluded. The second is if we just wanted to bring everybody in a license group up to the median of that. So just raise that. It would be 5.96 billion with this simple model. So an increase of, just about $300 million. And then this last, the purple one, that's the one that's going to change. That's aggregating all the additional cost that come from your selections and adding it to the current so that you could see, well, that's more or less what we would wind up with at the end. So for example, I could move it, and you can see how that affects as I move the license floor back, then this is going to drop back a little bit. So that's how that works. I'm thinking that I am not good at presenting and watching the chat at the same time. So I'll pause a second and see if Andrew, if there's any clarification questions that would be helpful before we move on to the second related tool.
Yes, there are a couple of questions. So one question that came in was, let's see here. Let me go back to where we started. So one question was asked by Stephen Martin, is the vision to have static salary scales for each level? So level 1 is one amount, and level 2 is one amount, or are we considering experience credit within each level? So what I was trying to say, type behind the scenes there, is essentially what you're doing is you're setting the idea of years of experience is not really included in this model. This is sort of if you are at a certain level of outcomes, then this is the salary you should be at. Now, what is cooked into this that you're seeing is you're seeing a wide range of salaries here, as illustrated by the gray and blue bars. Andy, if you can sort of mouse over a couple of those so you can see what I'm talking about. So those little bars there represent all the different salaries that fall within the area that these folks reside in. So we've placed a pile of people that are varying years of experience into, for example, license 4. So there are lots of different salaries in there, and we are essentially asking you all to tinker with, what should a salary of a license 4 candidate be? And the point at which that you've decided, let's say it's 60,000, let's say it's 58,000, whatever that is, then what happens is we would have to move all of those folks below the threshold of the salary that you've set up to that, and we would have to hold all those folks that are above it harmless, because the idea of taking somebody's salary away would be, sort of catastrophic in this transition. So the idea, again, is to try and set, and it's more of an exercise than it is, completely, this is how we're doing it. But it's an exercise to try and get us to understand that there are repercussions for adjusting a salary in these different bands, and what that repercussion is going to be in the overall. That's the purpose of this tool. Now, to that end, there were a couple of other questions along those lines. So, do the bars all represent full-time staff? For example, are we looking at earned salaries or projected annual salaries?
They all represent people who are employed 100%.
Okay. And then another question is, I understand the range of current salaries. I'm wondering about the vision for future salaries. Would each level have a range or not? And again, the idea here would be, you know, at least in the starting point of this, is to try and get everybody to a certain level. Now, there's some question, and this is a question that this group has to, you know, grapple with, which is, if I've been at that salary for X number of years, I've been demonstrating, you know, competency again and again, do I, you know, is it the will of this group to recommend that there should be salary increases over time? That's another question. That's one that this tool is not necessarily going to be able to capture, but that's something that this group has to think about. Let's see here. Another question came from Jeff Coltrane. Since there are some teachers who are showing up with higher salaries than the current salary schedule, i.e. more than $52,000, does this include state level supplements like master's pay or national board certified teacher pay? And I don't know that I know that one off the top of my head without poking around.
It does not include the national board certified teacher. I don't know about the masters. I can check.
Okay, we can look into that. Along the lines of whether or not these are based on FTE or full-time only, is it looking at 10 months, 11 months, or 12 months of employment? Or does it look at gross monthly and calculate all based on 10 months?
I don't think I understand that question. Can someone, I mean, it's a fine question. I just didn't understand it. Could you repeat that?
May I ask Andrew?
Sure.
Hi, Andy, this is Marcy from Wake. If you pulled teachers, let's say we have a multi-track year-round school and we have a teacher who works 12 months, their salary naturally is going to be the gross equivalent of 2 months more than a 10-month teacher. Is that considered in this? We also have a number of 11-month teachers who work in our year-round schools because we run 4 tracks in those year-round schools. So I'm wondering how those numbers figure in. That could be part of Mr. Coltrane's answer, depending on what it looks like. And we
I see what you're saying. Yep.
We also may have some just dating back to 2015 before we had a number of teachers who were held harmless to a scale that exists back that far. That includes longevity calculations, and we have to calculate those every year. Some of those may exceed 52.
That makes good sense to me, and I understand now exactly what you're getting. I don't know the answer to that. I should, but I will get that and to Kim and Dr. Salberg to know how, and then they can get it to you all.
Yeah, we'll just, I mean, some of these questions we'll get the answers to, and we'll zap that out to everybody as soon as we have answers to all the questions. It should be later today.
This is Jeff. That seems like a better explanation than master's pay. Is that there's some held harmless and possibly the FTE question might make more sense, because that would be more base salary than supplement. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Marcy and Jeff. Yep. Any other questions? I think one thing that I inadvertently forgot to say is the criteria for the advanced license, about how we differentiated. The difference between number 4 and the advanced. Number 4 were the CPLs who met or exceeded growth 3 to 5 years, and the advanced were people who exceeded growth for 3 to 5 years.
Right. And then I see some additional text coming in from Stephen Martin, this idea of, again, for the purposes of this chart here, in theory, somebody could get to level 4 relatively quickly, and then the preponderance of their career, they would be at level 4, which in the current modeling would be static. And so I have two responses to that, Stephen. The one is that there is the option to move into the advanced licenses over time. And the second is it's certainly within the purview of this subcommittee to make a recommendation that folks who are at that license level over time should consider maybe some increased pay over time, because you're not necessarily doing bad things. If you're competent at your job and doing your job, you should, the theory is that you could potentially move forward in salary over time. That is an option that you all can think about going forward.
And Andrew, this is Jeff. If I can chime in on that, I think as I would interpret this tool is to help us set that baseline. So if this were to go into effect next year, what would it take to do it next year? And then I think moving forward, as this group and PEPSC more broadly get to a final proposal, then we would work more closely with the Office of State Budget Management and maybe fiscal research at the legislature to start looking at how do we then project forward to future years if the group recommends we want to see, COLA increases or some type of step increase at license 4, that then it would build on what this base sort of looks at moving forward.
Yeah, that's great. And I see Dr. Ennis has asked a question about is there anywhere in this model to incorporate additional pay for master's degrees and or national board certification? At this time, there is not, Dr. Ennis, but I can tell you that if we have some raw modeling here, we could very easily estimate the number of folks with advanced degrees and the number of folks with national board certification, and create another dashboard to think about if we were to add additional pay for those things, what would that do to the overall model that you have? So right now, I would say no, that is not something that we have in the current tool that you have in front of you, but it is not a super heavy lift to think about taking a model that you have and incorporating those components into it for a future exercise.
And along those lines, if you click on the suggestions tab here, it would, a lot of times for me, as I use a tool like this, I start a little punch list of things like, well, I wish it could do this or this. This is the place for you to enter as many as you want, click submit, and as they do, they will start to appear over here on the right if you refresh your screen. But let's take a second to then let me just show you the second tool, and it's related to the first, of course, but this one is a little bit more about the future state, more of a thought exercise about if we were starting from a blank slate, what would it look like? So here's how it works. If someone said to you in one of the previous conversations, someone in the group suggested, well, maybe we should be prepared if someone said, give us your, and I'm going to forget the numbers the person quoted, give us your $7 billion estimate, your $6 billion, your $5 billion, or something like that. This tool can help you start to get at that sum. So there are 3 columns where you enter some information based on what your preferences are that result in a 4th column of results. The first column, you set some totals. You can say, well, let's project how many teachers we think we would have in a given year. I've got it initially set at 94,000, but that's what we have now. You could set it you could set it higher. If you do that, you need to allow for the apprentices to be added in. Here you'd say this would be the number that if someone said to you, okay, I think I want to see your $6 billion estimate. You'd set it there. here, just as a reference, this is just static and it's coming from this first tab, just what our current total is. Then you get your second column. Is where you set the share of the license percentage of all teachers. So whereas before, we were starting from a distribution of teachers, kind of our best estimates of what was happening in the current data. Here, you can ignore that if you want and just say, well, let's just estimate. What would it be like if we thought the apprentices were about 4% of the teachers, license 1, 2%, 6%. You can adjust these as you'd like. And the only thing you need to remember is everybody's got to fall into one bucket so that the totals would equal 100%. And this is going to help you see if you're on track for that. If you want to see then how you've done, then you click that chart and this will kind of show you, all right, this is what I think. I think the bulk of people are going to be in license 4. There's going to be some here. Here, maybe I think there's going to be 20% of the people in advanced, and here's my ratio within that. That's what you can do there. This third column, then you're setting the salaries, but now this time, instead of setting them dollar amounts, you're setting them relative to one salary, and that's the license 4 salary. And we just chose that because it looks like that would be the most common of the licenses. So here you'd say, well, should an apprentice, what percentage of a license 4 should an apprentice make? I think it should be 35. A license 1, 30, 25. These are just starting points that you have to have a starting point somewhere. So just switch it around. I think you might think, I think the advanced leadership at the top of the license tiers, I think they should have 30% more than the license 4. Again, you can see your chart there. You can see how that's working there to see the ranges. And then what it's doing kind of behind the scenes is just solving for, if you've got this many teachers and you think they're going to be distributed across the licenses this way, and you've got this many dollars to spend, and you want the salaries to be relative to this, then here's what the salaries would be. So in this case, the model just spit out, 51,000 as the floor for the license 4, and then all of these just track with the relative percentages of that. So this is just a way to kind of, it's getting at some of the same information, but just from a different perspective, where you're kind of starting from these parameters of how much you have to spend, how many people, and you're getting to set all the distributions yourself to see. So I'll pause there and see if we've got any questions. Okay, well, if not, then Andrew, I will pass it over to you for the next part.
Sure, and let me prompt you with 2 other thoughts here, Andy. One is, can you talk a little bit about the PDF button at the bottom of each of those tabs?
Mm-hmm. In the assignment that in the breakout groups, one of the things that you're going to be asked to do is just to experiment with different settings and to come up with some that you think you like. And you don't have to come up with necessarily just one best, but just different ones. As you get to something that looks like, I want to save that, because that configuration of settings might be something to come back to. You can just click the download PDF. And what it should do is allow you to basically save a screenshot to a PDF file.
Very good. All right. I think I can navigate the second thing I was going to ask you at a later time. So let's see if we can go back to the PowerPoint. And I don't know, Kim, if you can navigate that for a second. She's working on it. There we go. All right, so let's take a look. So we've taken a look at the compensation scenario tool. You can go to the next slide there. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a breakout like we've done in the past. This will be for 45 minutes. It'll be a good chunk of time, for you to have a nice conversation about this and lay some things out on the table. And I would encourage you to explore both individually, because you all have a link. You can pull that up and you can be tinkering. But also, the idea of working collectively on one is the goal here. But ultimately, we're trying to get each of these groups to discuss and potentially produce a cost proposal, given the limitations that we have, obviously. But this is a starting point, and it's a very useful way to sort of tinker without having to, have a million sheets of paper and us coming up with 100 different static documents. This is a sort of a flexible, interactive dashboard that allows you to do some of this work on your own in these smaller groups. So let's take a look at what we're going to ask you to do here on the next slide. So each of you has a sort of a team leader, which you saw on that previous slide. And what we're going to ask you to do is to go into these smaller groups and think about how you want to distribute the salary floors for each of those license levels, and to input that into the tool that's on that far left side of things. And ultimately, just sort of go through the process that Andy just sort of walked you through. With the idea of at all times you're sort of thinking about, and again, this is a crude estimation, but it's a starting point based on your discussions and based on how you're tinkering. When you get to the back end of this, we know that the current budget based on these numbers is 5.67, and that's illustrated at the top of the first page that you saw. As you start to tinker and consider all the things that you're moving and all the rationale behind it, you're going to be pushing and pulling on that number. And so at what point do you think a threshold becomes unrealistic for lawmakers to be thinking about? If you wanted everybody to have $100,000 salary, for example, well, you could certainly do that in the exercise, and it would push it to a range that I think pretty much everybody on this call would assume is folly when we think about handing this over to lawmakers. So the idea that you're sort of reining yourself in here is, to what extent are we trying to navigate a realistic budget? And that's why Andy was mentioning he has both of those tools, because you can think about, here's what we think our best case scenario is if we tried to rein that in and meet halfway between the current budget and our optimal. This is what we think this would be. So it's a discussion point around that topic that we're trying to get at. And then when you get to the end of this whole thing, we're going to ask that you download a PDF of that final cost proposal. So we just have you choose. It could be the facilitators in each of those could be driving the ship there to create the final proposal. And you can do one of two things. You can either kick that to PDF and zap that over to us, ultimately Kim or myself, or you can take a screenshot and you can put that screenshot into your notes document, which is part of the materials for today's meeting as well. So you could do that one of two ways. But the real point here is to have 4 different groups navigate this, have a good discussion, and come up with what they think is their best collective thought. And then we're going to take a look over, in future meetings and future activities. We're going to look at across all 4 of those and see where everybody lies and think about next steps from that point. So if we go to the next slide here, these are the groups. We're going to ask that you go into those groups in just a minute. Again, we're going to give you a good chunk of time for that. You'll see the facilitators are across the top there. And you'll also see the double asterisks towards the bottom of each of those columns. Kim Evans in group 1, Paul Marshall in group 2, Andy Baxter in group 3, and me in group 4. These are folks. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Andrew, can I just add one thing?
Yeah, you can add 2.
Thank you. Paul is not available, so Megan will be stepping in for Paul.
Oh.
Megan Comstock.
Okay, so Megan is in
Actually,
group 2.
Kimberly, I'm here.
Oh,
I am
Paul is
here.
there.
Thank you, Paul.
Yes.
Okay, great. So, so the Kim, Paul, Andy, and Andrew folks are guys here at the department, and we have been tinkering with the development of this tool. So we're very close and comfortable with this tool. So as you have questions within your groups, you can ask questions because we know we're sensitive to the fact that we hit you with a lot of information on this tool. So if you have questions regarding the manipulation of the tool or the how to make it do something, feel free to reach out to any of us in that group. We'll be able to help you as needed. Okay. So if there's no questions, I'm going to give a quick pregnant pause for questions if there's any questions, and if not, we're going to cut you loose to the small group breakouts, and we'll see how we do with this exercise.
So Andrew, before we move, folks, just want to do a time check. We're at about 12:50. So what we'll do, about 40 minutes in your breakout groups, and then we'll come back and do 30 minutes as a whole group, which will take us up to 2 o'clock. And we'll ask our facilitators if each facilitator will come back prepared to share in a 5 to 7 minute window what your group has discussed and kind of what you're thinking, then that would be great.
Outstanding. I'm not outside of the raving reviews of Andy's tool. Well done, Andy. It looks like we're good to go. So Kim, if you want to launch the subgroups, we'll see you in a little bit.
We're back.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Hope you enjoyed your math assignment. What we'll do is we'll spend the next 23 minutes there about kind of going group by group, asking the facilitator to share with us in about a 5-minute window. We don't have a great deal of time, but we want to hear what some of the thoughts were, what some of your ideas are relative to the assignment that you were given. So we'll begin with group one. And Brenda, if you're with us, we'd love to hear from you and what group one had to share.
I am with us. I'm just trying to get my video going.
Unfortunately, you can't hear us cheer for Brenda for this excellent group we were in, but
Can you see me?
yes,
We can see you.
Okay. Fantastic group, incredible conversation. We were literally going, we have 10 seconds left. What else can we cover? So we were working hard. Really pleased with the conversation. We actually did get to do both charts from both directions. I'll PDF and send those to you. We spent actually a lot of time talking about kind of remembering how, when you're thinking about this, that there's such a small percentage in those first licensure groups, and that the bulk of the conversation is really about the 4 and the 4 advanced when you're talking about numbers and how it affects the cost of this thinking. We also had an interesting conversation about the fact that starting pay is different depending on how you're coming into this. So starting pay for somebody from an EPP is now really license 3. So if we sort of peg license 1 to starting pay versus peg it to license, you can't really peg, say, $35,000 to license 3, because that's not starting pay for somebody who's coming in without an EPP. But so really kind of having to shift our mindset onto where is starting pay and how are we looking at these numbers. So with that in mind, we started off by putting license 1 at 35, which is the current starting pay, but we all believe is not enough. And so we'd had this within the larger group last meeting, this conversation about 38 as sort of an inflation adjusted starting pay. So we put that at license 2, put license 3 just a notch above that at 40. So you've got a good $35,000 increase for starting pay for an EPP graduate, but a nice boost from license 1 to license 3. And then given that the current top of the schedule is about 52, we put that for 4 minus, and we put 55 for license 4. The challenge with this model is it only has 11% in advanced roles. So it sort of, in my opinion, if we're going to have 30% advanced roles, it suppresses the overall cost of the model because it only has 11% getting that advanced number. So then we pivoted to the other model. I'm sorry, I'm going super, super fast. And you kind of back mapped from those same numbers, but putting in those advanced role percentages at 20% for excellence and 10% for leadership in terms of the percentage of people, and then flipped in terms of dollars is 10%, a plus 10% for excellence and a plus 30% for leadership. And then that got us to a model that was, and I haven't gotten the apprenticeship one right, but we were looking at the apprenticeship number being somewhere around 30, sort of somewhere between a TA and license 1. License 1 being at 35, license 2 being at 38, license 3 being at 40, like we discussed. And then the cost of that model came to about $900 million. There's the punchline. So we did have a really robust conversation about how was it 2015, over 4 years, we did have about $1 billion pay increase that filled in that big gap at the front end of the teacher pay schedule. So it is not impossible to reach that number over several years. It's been done before, not too long ago. So, having a conversation about those numbers over time, and of course the possibility of using non-recurring, maybe surplus money or COVID money to be able to do it over less time, and then have the recurring phase in over time. So that's a whole heck of a lot. happy to discuss further. Anyone from my team have anything else to add to that? That was a whole heck of a lot to try.
No, great job, Brenda. Thank you. And thank you, Group 1, for engaging. Jeff, we'd like to hear from your group, Group 2 now.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dr. Graham. And our group, we did not arrive at a full sort of recommendation from our group, but we have a proposal that we were discussing, and I think we need to do some further refinement on. But we spent some time at the beginning sort of going back over the sort of requirements in the framework. And there was some confusion, and I think this is some confusion I've noticed in some other conversations I've had, that an apprentice teacher is not the beginning teacher license in this model. It is really something below the beginning teacher license. I think as Brenda's group sort of said, that's something between an assistant and a beginning teacher. And so sort of clarifying that, and then spent some time going over the requirements in license 1, 2, 3, and 4. But the proposal that we discussed that our group was sort of looking at was actually starting license 1 at 38,000, which would be in the ballpark of what I think we were just discussing about sort of what might have been some reasonable increases over the last couple of years to that initial license. And then a small increase between license 1 and 2, jumping from 38 to 40. And then recognizing both the sort of skill set the teachers will have developed, either coming into the profession if they come out of an EPP or having worked over the course of a couple of years to get to license 3. A jump from 40 to 46 for license 3. With the idea being that that's about a $500 increase a month, which is a pretty reasonable salary jump. And again, recognizing the skills that license 3 acknowledges. And then another significant jump between 3 and 4, from 46 to 56,000. And 56, most teachers currently in license 4, I think it's about 95% are not making 56,000. So that would be a sizable increase. But again, one that actually would put us, I think we went back towards the end and was looking at some of the SREB data that they shared, and that puts us in the average for teachers at the bachelor's level for the SREB region. The part we did not get to really hash out a lot was on the license advanced. We sort of built in but I know one of the members of our group, their advanced teachers make $8,000 above the current CPL or the current salary. And so I think that's one area that we need to continue to do some work on. This model, again, without sort of those adjustments to that advanced license, actually comes out just slightly above the one that Brenda just discussed. We come out at about $1 billion more per year than where we are currently. So it's just over $6.5 billion instead of the $5.6 billion. And we did not get to do the future state tool. I think we'll need to go back and play around with that, but I do have a screenshot of our proposal that we discussed. And again, we never quite settled on this as a group. We were still in conversations when our screen started ticking off time for us. So anybody else on my group that would like to chime in?
Good deal. Jeff, very quickly, did you all handle the 4- group at all?
We did not. We did not. And that's the other group we did not. I think this is currently set at 56, but we did not get to discuss that group either. So
okay.
The advanced group, we didn't get to talk about very much.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks, Group 2. Great job. Brian, we'll come to you now for Group 3. I think you're muted, Brian, or maybe it's me.
getting used to this whole video conference thing. It's all new to me. We did similar modeling to the other groups, so I'm not going to go through our numbers, but I did want to mention a few things that we talked about that maybe have helped to the committee in getting there. So one is just naming that the standard that needs to be met to reach level 4 is such an important part of this conversation, and the standard to be keeping yourself in level 4. It's not our committee's responsibility, but we talked a lot about how important getting that right is because so much else hinges on that. So I just wanted to flag that as something that if this committee could have some way to weigh in on that, I'm sure we would appreciate it. Number 2, we actually talked quite a bit about the 4 minus and also about the advanced roles. What would happen to someone who qualifies for level 4, but then doesn't meet the standard, whatever that may be, over time? What about someone who qualifies for the advanced level and doesn't meet the standard over time? Would their salary go down, or what would happen to them? We ended up modeling more 4 minus not having a salary loss, more on the thought that that person would probably be having a conversation with their principal about what would be necessary for them to keep teaching. But that's a big open question that we didn't resolve. What happens to someone who doesn't meet the standard after having met it? And then what happens to them over time, and particularly with their pay? So we talked quite a bit about that without a great resolution. Number 3, we talked a lot about should there be steps in level 4. So once someone reaches that level, should they be at that level permanently, unless they take one of the advanced roles, perhaps getting COLA increases, or should they have an experience base increase over their career, since most people would stay in that level for their entire career? We ended up modeling some increase above what the committee recommended last time, assuming there might be some steps, but that's a key policy issue for this committee. And then finally, we modeled, as the others did, something similar to what the committee had agreed on the last call. We also thought about what if there was a larger amount of funding available. We made a bigger model where the increase was more like 1.3 billion above the current state, just to see what that would look like. What I wanted to share from that was just the insight that I think at least several of our group shared, that if there was more money available, we would want to direct it towards level 4 and up rather than the lower levels on the continuum. Thinking being that those levels are already up from current, and we'd want to put more of the funding towards teachers, the bulk of teachers that are in those level 4 and advanced roles. I wouldn't say that's necessarily a consensus of the group. We didn't have the chance to talk about it, but that was one of the insights that some of the committee members shared. And then finally, we increased the percentage of advanced roles, like Brenda mentioned, to something more like 26%, on the thinking that you'd need that percentage to qualify in order to have enough teachers to play those advanced roles across the state. So that was another assumption that we put into the model. So I'll stop there and see if my breakout members want to add anything.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Group 3. Great observations. Things for us to consider.
This is Jeff. Can I just share, to piggyback on what Brian said, our group had also discussed the need for steps or COLAs or some type of salary increase at level 4 for those teachers that are not interested in moving on to an advanced position at some point. So our group would second what Brian's group discussed.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I think those points 2 and 3, what to do with the 4 minus group, and then if there's some type of steps or something of that nature with the license 4, I think those are 2 things. I believe those are 2 things we're going to have to wrestle with and pin down here shortly. So, great observation. All right, Chad, we'll come to you for Group 4.
Yeah, thanks. So first I'll invite anyone else from Group 4 to add on to anything I say here or amend. We did talk about we started with the proposals from the June meeting, which if folks remember, it was 38,000 for license 1, 40,000 for license 2, 45 for license 3, 53 for license 4, and then 58 for the advanced roles. Just as a baseline, that gave us a grand total of about 6.33 billion system-wide, or an increase of about 650 million. The other thing that we noted was that would increase the base salaries for the large proportion of teachers. Depending on tier, it was about 75 to 100% of teachers that would be getting higher base salaries, at least from the state level. And so we talked about the implications of equity of that across the state and sort of bringing a lot more people up to a higher base and implications for rural communities or communities without local supplements. We didn't spend as much time on scenario 2. We did have quite a bit of discussion around license tier 4 and 4 minus, and we toyed around with the idea of in one hand, we think it's could send a bad message if people go down, but also could also send a bad message if they're paid the same, if encourages coasting or no incentive to meet expectations. We did talk about this idea of whether this discussion belongs in the pay schedule or whether it's more of a licensure employment question, that they should be having those types of conversations rather than a statewide pay schedule issue. We didn't get a ton else to do on scenario 2, sort of ran out of time, but we felt a pretty strong resounding perception that the adult leadership is particularly important, and it's almost like having an extra assistant principal in the school, and so we were very supportive of extra pay for that role. I will stop there for tier 4 group. Anything else folks want to add?
That was epic, Chad. Well done.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Group 4. So let me thank all of you. I know we threw a lot at you here over the last hour or so and asked you to do quite a bit, but a great tool created by our colleagues at DPI, and thank you, Dr. Baxter, for taking the lead in that space. We have about 6 minutes remaining, so I want to be cognizant of our time, and I don't want to add the cognitive load, but I would like to spend just a few seconds, if possible. I want to circle back to that 4 minus group and just kind of hear some thoughts from the collective body over the next 3 or 4 minutes here about your thought process relative to what we might consider with the 4 minus group. If you're not performing well, you've gotten into that license 4 area, not necessarily having impact on student learning, do we slide people's salaries back? Do they remain constant? Just want to hear some initial thoughts and reactions about what your beliefs are relative to that group.
Dr. Graham, this is Jeff. I've been, since we saw that sort of that data, I've been thinking about this as well. And I know that they'll obviously I think the advancement and the licensure groups will be thinking about this, but I think this, in my mind, this comes down to a renewal question, is that group, given that many of them may be CPL license holders, and how would we in this structure handle them? And I would think we would think about it from a renewal perspective at this point. So maybe their salaries would stay where they are, or would move if they're, if they could move within a license 1, 2, or 3, that would move to that. But then they would be on some type of probationary 5-year renewal cycle to try and help them get to that 3 out of 5 years of effectiveness, so that then they can move into that next license that they'd be eligible for, hopefully the license 4. But I would think it's probably more of a renewal policy question, maybe than a specifically a salary question. But that's the way I had been thinking about it, and just would put that out there for thought.
No, great, Jeff. Reactions?
I have a thought about this. This is Stephen Martin in Watauga. So this is good conversation. My fear is there's going to be a lot of work to be done to make sure our metrics are correct for evaluating teacher effectiveness. Our group talked about this in our breakout session. I think the numbers right now maybe somewhere in the 30% range, 35% of teachers in the state that have an effectiveness measure. So let's just say 65% do not. And if we're going to use these levels, and a 4- means this teacher has not been effective 3 out of 5 years, we got to make sure those metrics are right if we're going to start talking about pay or things, consequences to that. So I'd be interested to know what the plans are for measuring teacher effectiveness for 100% of the teachers, to be able to adequately say what should happen if we have a teacher who's not effective.
Good question. I'm not sure, DPI colleagues, is there another subcommittee that's working in that space?
Yes, from this committee is about the pay. The other committees are working on what will differentiate in the groups between the license levels. We come up with a different program than just growth.
Okay. So we'll make certain that the co-chairs that we're, of course, getting these types of questions between the different subcommittees, so we can make certain we're paying attention to that issue. But that's a fantastic observation. If this stuff is going to be based upon effectiveness, we want to make certain that the metrics are telling us what they should be telling us in an accurate and valid way.
This is Dan Swartz. I just want to emphasize Jeff's comments about this kind of being more around conversation about renewal. I think the situation comes down to, if you take away someone's pay, the likelihood is that they're going to leave. And so if that is not our desire for that person or for that individual, then we would need to hold that salary constant and come up with other alternatives. Maybe it is a performance plan or what have you. I think we could also piggyback this with whatever we discuss about the salary step idea. So maybe it's not that we reduce their pay, but maybe it's just that they don't take the step up that next year because they have had this. And so then they have, 1 or 2 years to get corrected, and then they can make that step at the end of the year like other people would. That's another thought, but that gets into what do we do with steps. So.
No, great feedback, Dan. I know Monica Lambert in Group 4 had the same thought process, but I wanted to get a feel for what some of you thought collectively in this space. So great feedback, great input. I realize we're at 1:59, actually just flipped to 2 o'clock on my clock. So a couple of quick things. Number one, please make certain facilitators, if you have not emailed your PDFs to Kim and Andrew, please make certain that you do so. I saw in the chat area a question about, could we ensure that the different groups, what the groups came up with, that's shared with the entire group, and we'll make certain that that's done so everyone can see across the different groups what we came up with. Then, of course, we'll leverage all this information to begin to frame out a revised vision map with the salaries embedded within it. And then in our next meeting, I suppose we'll be dealing a little bit more with that 4- group, and then the steps that we've talked about here at the tail end of the conversation. So, Dr. Fleming, anything that you want to add before we close out here this afternoon?
Well, I just want to say this has probably been the most productive meeting we've had. I'm really excited to hear some of the, really pleased to hear some of the comments from each of the groups. Again, really pleased with our small group that we had as well in the discussion. So I really think we're starting to put pen to paper and starting to see what some of our decisions can look like on a fiscal side, but also, ultimately if it will work or not, and how we handle special situations and hold harmless and teacher performance and everything. So I do appreciate everybody's work this morning. It really wasn't easy work, but it was enjoyable because we can see which direction we're headed, and I do appreciate it again. And I want to thank DPI staff for all their hard work with the subcommittee as well.
Agreed. I can't reiterate that point enough. DPI and Dr. Baxter, thank you all for working on the tool that we use this afternoon. Very useful in guiding our conversation. I'm certain we'll circle back to it and continue to use it. And again, I'd like to thank all of you all for your engagement and your thought in this process. So we will follow up with you and make certain that we get you information about the next meeting date and time. And until then, we ask that you please take good care of yourselves. Thank you again. And I know we need to have a motion to close the meeting, Dr. Evans. So can I have a motion to end the meeting?
So moved. This is Marcy.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
This is
Second,
Dan.
this is
Second.
Catherine Truitt.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded that we adjourn the meeting. All those in favor say aye.
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 And we'll say bye to those who oppose. You all have a good afternoon.